One of the biggest mistakes people make after being hurt is continuing to give their energy to the very person who caused the pain. They keep reacting, keep explaining, keep checking their phone, hoping for messages. Keep replaying conversations in their mind, trying to fix what already broke. And without realizing it, every emotional reaction keeps the connection alive. Because when someone knows they can still control your emotions, they never truly feel your absence. That is why the moment you stop reacting, everything begins to change. See, many people think power comes from chasing harder, proving their worth louder, or making someone understand what they lost. But real power is emotional control. Real power is learning how to pull your energy back instead of constantly pouring it into someone who became comfortable taking it for granted. He expected another emotional message, another attempt to fix things, another moment where you broke your own boundaries just to keep him close. He expected tears, anger, questions, and emotional chaos because those reactions reassured him that he still had access to your heart. But the moment you became calm, quiet, and emotionally unavailable, the dynamic shifted completely because silence creates uncertainty. When you stop reacting, he no longer knows where he stands emotionally in your life. He starts wondering whether you finally moved on, whether someone else now has your attention, whether you still care at all. And those questions become louder when you are no longer feeding him emotional reassurance through constant reactions. The truth is, your energy was never small. Your attention, your care, your emotional presence, all of it brought comfort into his life in ways he probably did not fully appreciate while he still had access to it. But once you pull that energy back, the emptiness becomes noticeable. Suddenly, the attention he expected is gone. The emotional support he relied on disappears. The constant validation no longer exists, and that absence begins speaking louder than any argument ever could. What makes this difficult is that silence requires discipline. It is easy to react emotionally when you are hurt. Easy to send one more message. Easy to check whether he misses you. But every time you resist the urge to chase, you rebuild your self-respect piece by piece. You remind yourself that your value does not decrease simply because someone failed to recognize it properly. And slowly, something powerful begins happening inside you. The focus shifts away from him and back toward yourself. Instead of spending your energy monitoring his behavior, you begin protecting your peace. You stop needing constant answers. You stop trying to force clarity from someone who created confusion. And with every day you remain emotionally grounded, you become stronger. Meanwhile, he begins feeling the emotional distance more deeply. Not because you are trying to manipulate him, but because people often notice value most when access disappears. Your silence removes the emotional comfort he once depended on without realizing it. And when someone can no longer reach you the same way emotionally, regret starts growing quietly inside them. But this is important to understand. The goal is not to pretend not to care. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself emotionally for someone who became too comfortable with your reactions. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming disciplined with your energy. Because the moment you stop giving someone unlimited access to your emotions, they finally have to face what life feels like without your presence constantly available to them. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is become silent long enough for your absence to say everything your words no longer need to explain. One of the most powerful things you can do after someone hurts you is stop making them the center of your life and start rebuilding yourself instead. Too many people stay emotionally frozen after heartbreak. They spend months watching someone else's life, checking social media, replaying old memories, and wondering whether the other person regrets losing them. Meanwhile, their own dreams, confidence, and peace slowly fade into the background. But the moment you shift your focus away from him and back toward yourself, everything changes, because growth creates a different kind of power. He expected you to stay emotionally attached. He expected your world to continue revolving around him even after the disappointment, confusion, and pain. He thought you would remain stuck in the same emotional place, waiting for attention, explanations, or closure. But instead, you started evolving quietly, and nothing creates deeper regret than watching someone become stronger after you underestimated them. You begin investing in yourself again, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially. The energy that once went into overthinking him now goes into improving your own life. You start taking care of your health, your goals, your peace, your future. You reconnect with parts of yourself that were neglected while you were busy trying to hold a broken connection together. And slowly, your entire presence changes. You carry yourself differently when your happiness no longer depends on someone choosing you. There is confidence in your energy, calmness in your silence, discipline in the way you move. You stop looking for validation because you are finally building a life that fulfills you beyond emotional attachment. At first, he may not fully notice the transformation. People rarely appreciate what they lost immediately. But over time, your absence starts feeling different. You are no longer the person emotionally waiting around for him. You are no longer constantly available. Your energy feels distant because your focus is no longer trapped in the past. And that is when he starts realizing you are becoming someone he can no longer easily reach. What truly creates regret is not revenge. It is replacement through growth. Not replacing him with another person immediately, but replacing the emotional dependency that once kept you stuck. You become more independent, more emotionally stable, more connected to your purpose. And suddenly, the version of you he took for granted becomes rare. See, many people expect heartbreak to destroy confidence. They expect pain to weaken you permanently. But when you use pain as fuel for transformation, you become unforgettable. While he stayed comfortable expecting your attention, you turned your energy toward becoming stronger than the situation that hurt you. And the beautiful part is this: your growth eventually stops being about him completely. In the beginning, healing may feel connected to proving something, but real transformation happens when you no longer care about proving anything at all. You improve because you finally understand your own worth. You evolve because you refuse to let pain define your future. You become disciplined because peace matters more than emotional chaos. Now he watches from a distance, realizing something painful. The person he thought would always stay emotionally attached has outgrown the version of themselves that once chased him. And the stronger, calmer, more confident you become, the more he feels left behind by the very person he underestimated. Because people often fail to value someone while they are available, but they notice deeply when that person starts building a life that no longer needs them to feel complete. And sometimes the greatest revenge is becoming so fulfilled within yourself that the person who hurt you can no longer recognize the version of you they once had access to. Most people do not realize the true value of emotional comfort until it disappears from their life completely. While you were there, your presence felt normal to him. Your support, your understanding, your loyalty, your attention. He became so used to receiving those things that he stopped recognizing how rare they actually were. He assumed your care would always be available, no matter how inconsistent his effort became. And that is the danger of becoming too emotionally available to someone who no longer appreciates your value. They start treating your presence like a guarantee instead of a gift. But everything changes the moment that emotional comfort disappears. Suddenly, the person who always listened is no longer there. The person who gave reassurance, patience, encouragement, and emotional safety becomes distant. The messages stop. The emotional availability fades. The energy he relied on quietly leaves his life, and for the first time, he is forced to experience the absence of what he once took for granted. That absence becomes louder than words. See, emotional comfort is powerful because it creates stability. When someone genuinely cares for you, they bring peace into your life in ways you often fail to notice while they are still around. They become part of your routine emotionally. You expect their support, their understanding, their presence. And when that suddenly disappears, it leaves behind an emptiness that cannot easily be replaced. At first, he may act unaffected. Pride often hides realization in the beginning. He may distract himself, pretend he does not care, or assume you will eventually return emotionally like before. But over time, reality starts settling in. The emotional warmth he once depended on is gone. The person who made life feel emotionally easier is no longer providing that comfort freely. And that is when regret slowly begins building inside him, because absence exposes value. When you were constantly available, he had the luxury of overlooking your importance. But once your energy becomes unavailable, he starts noticing all the things you quietly brought into his life. The peace, the support, the consistency, the emotional security. And what hurts him most is realizing too late that genuine emotional connection is difficult to replace. This is why emotional withdrawal becomes powerful. Not because it is manipulation, but because it allows someone to finally feel the consequences of losing access to you. As long as you continue giving endless attention, despite being undervalued, there is no reason for reflection to happen. But the moment you stop overextending yourself emotionally, the dynamic changes completely. Now he has to sit with the silence. Now he has to feel what life is like without your reassurance, softening everything around him. Now he begins remembering the little things he ignored, while you were still there trying to hold the relationship together. And what makes this even more painful for him is seeing that you are no longer desperate to return. You are protecting your peace, moving differently, becoming emotionally stronger. That confidence makes your absence even heavier because it forces him to realize you are no longer emotionally dependent on the connection the way you once were. The truth is, many people never appreciate emotional safety until they lose it. They assume loyal people will continue loving endlessly without limits. But eventually, even the most patient heart reaches a point where protecting its peace becomes more important than maintaining a one-sided connection. And sometimes, the greatest lesson someone learns is realizing too late that the person they treated casually was the very person who made their life feel emotionally whole. One of the most powerful things you can do after being hurt is refuse to let your pain make you loud. Most people expect emotional chaos after disappointment. They expect angry messages, emotional breakdowns, endless explanations, or desperate attempts to be understood. They expect you to fight for their attention even after they fail to value your presence properly. But when you choose silence instead, something shifts completely. Because silence creates a kind of power that words often cannot. He expected reactions from you. He expected proof that he still had emotional control over your heart. Every argument, every emotional message, every attempt to explain your pain would have reassured him that you were still emotionally trapped in the connection. But the moment you became calm, distant, and focused on yourself instead of chasing answers, uncertainty entered his mind. Now he starts wondering, why did you suddenly stop explaining yourself? Why are you no longer trying to convince him of your worth? Why does your silence feel heavier than your words ever did? And the hardest thing for him to accept is that your quietness no longer comes from weakness. See, there comes a point where emotionally mature people realize not every battle deserves their energy. You stop trying to force understanding from someone committed to misunderstanding you. You stop repeating your pain to people who already saw your tears and changed nothing. You stop begging for consistency from someone who repeatedly showed you inconsistency instead. And that silence becomes unforgettable because it breaks the emotional pattern they expected from you. Most people know how to handle emotional reactions. They know how to ignore messages, argue back, manipulate conversations, or temporarily reassure you just enough to keep you attached. But silence removes access. Silence removes emotional predictability. Suddenly, they no longer know what you feel, what you think, or whether they still matter in your life the same way. And that uncertainty begins following them quietly. What makes silence so powerful is that it protects your dignity while exposing theirs. Instead of publicly breaking down, you heal privately. Instead of trying to make them feel guilty, you focus on rebuilding yourself. Instead of proving your pain constantly, you allow your absence and your growth to speak for themselves. And over time, your silence starts carrying a message louder than any argument could. You no longer need validation from someone who failed to value you correctly. That realization affects people deeply because they expected your pain to keep you emotionally attached forever. They expected your hurt to make you chase them harder. But calmness after disappointment is intimidating. It signals emotional strength. It shows that while the situation may have hurt you, it did not destroy your self-respect. And this does not mean you never felt pain. Silence is not pretending you do not care. Silence is choosing not to abandon yourself emotionally, trying to force someone else to care properly. It is understanding that peace matters more than proving your worth repeatedly to the wrong person. Meanwhile, while you are quietly rebuilding your life, he is left sitting with unanswered questions. Your silence forces reflection, because there are no emotional reactions left to distract him from the consequences of losing you. No chaos, no drama. Just the reality of your absence becoming more noticeable every day, because people often expect pain to make you weak. They never expect it to make you wiser. And sometimes the loudest statement you can make is quietly moving forward without explaining anything at all. One of the most dangerous moments after heartbreak is not when someone leaves. It is when they come back. Because loneliness has a way of making people forget why they suffered in the first place. After enough time passes, the pain starts fading while the memories become softer. You begin remembering the good moments, the connection, the comfort, the familiarity, and suddenly, the same person who once disrupted your peace starts feeling emotionally safe again simply because they are familiar to your heart. That is why healing requires discipline, because not every apology deserves access to you again. Not every moment of regret means someone has truly changed, and not every person who returns is returning because they finally value you properly. Sometimes people come back because they miss the comfort you provided, the attention, the emotional security, the loyalty they could not replace after losing you. And this is where many people lose the progress they fought so hard to build. The moment he notices your silence, your growth, your emotional distance, this may suddenly return with affection, attention, and promises. He may say all the things you once begged to hear. He may finally act differently after realizing you are no longer emotionally available the same way. But you must remember something important. Temporary effort often appears when someone fears losing access, not necessarily when they have fully changed. That is why you cannot allow loneliness to make decisions your healed self would regret later. Missing someone does not erase the emotional damage they caused. Feeling attached does not automatically mean the relationship became healthy. And just because someone suddenly values you after losing you does not mean they valued you while they still had you. Real growth means remembering the full reality, not just the moments your heart wants to romanticize. Remember the nights you cried, trying to understand mixed signals. Remember the emotional exhaustion of constantly questioning where you stood. Remember how much of yourself you sacrificed, trying to hold the relationship together alone. Those experiences matter too, because people often return when they sense your energy pulling away completely. Your confidence becomes attractive once they realize they can no longer control your emotions the same way. But your healing journey should not be destroyed simply because someone suddenly misses the access they once took for granted. You have to ask yourself difficult questions honestly. Has the behavior truly changed consistently? Has accountability replaced excuses? Has emotional maturity replaced confusion and inconsistency? Or are you simply being offered temporary affection because your absence created discomfort? Self-worth is protecting your peace even when your emotions feel vulnerable. It is understanding that familiarity is not always love. Sometimes familiarity is simply attachment to what once felt emotionally significant, even if it hurt you deeply. And this is where boundaries become powerful. Boundaries are not punishment, they are self-respect. They are the decision to stop reopening wounds that barely finished healing. They are the understanding that protecting your emotional stability matters more than satisfying temporary loneliness. Because the truth is, some people only recognize your value once you finally stop chasing them. But recognition alone is not enough if the same patterns continue repeating underneath. Your future deserves more than recycled pain disguised as second chances. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is resist the urge to return to the very place you fought so hard to emotionally escape. Your greatest power will never come from making someone jealous, making them suffer, or making them beg for another chance. Real power begins the moment your happiness no longer depends on whether someone regrets losing you. Because true emotional freedom is not about controlling another person's feelings. It is about finally taking control of your own life again. For a long time, your emotions may have revolved around him. His attention affected your mood. His messages affected your peace. His distance created anxiety. His approval made you feel valued, and his silence made you question yourself. That kind of emotional dependence is exhausting because it places your happiness in the hands of someone who may not even fully appreciate the weight of that power. But healing changes you. Slowly, you begin reconnecting with yourself. You stop waking up every day wondering whether he misses you. You stop checking for signs, waiting for messages, or hoping for emotional validation. Instead, your focus shifts toward creating a life that genuinely fulfills you beyond the relationship that once consumed your energy. And that transformation is powerful because it is real. You start finding peace in your own routine again. You rediscover goals, passions, friendships, and dreams that were neglected while you were emotionally trapped in confusion. You become more connected to yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And little by little, the version of you that once felt emotionally dependent starts disappearing. That is when you become dangerous in the best possible way. Because when someone can no longer control your emotions, they lose the power they once had over your life. And the person who expected you to stay emotionally attached forever suddenly realizes something uncomfortable. You are learning how to live happily without them. That realization creates regret naturally. Not because you are trying to punish them, but because genuine happiness changes your entire energy. There is confidence in your presence, calmness in your silence, freedom in the way you move through life. You no longer chase attention because your peace is no longer built around someone else choosing you. And people always notice when the person they underestimated starts glowing differently without their validation. But the beautiful part is this. By the time he fully realizes your value, your happiness is no longer connected to whether he returns or not. That is true healing. You stop measuring your worth through someone's ability to recognize it. You stop needing apologies to feel complete. You stop waiting for closure from people who created confusion instead of clarity. Now your life becomes bigger than the pain. You protect your energy differently. You stop tolerating emotional inconsistency. You stop begging for the bare minimum. You stop forcing connections that damage your peace. And because of that, you become emotionally untouchable. Not cold, not bitter, just deeply aware of your own value. Meanwhile, he may still carry the regret. He may wonder what would have happened if he had treated you better. He may replay memories after realizing the version of you he lost no longer exists in the same way. But your purpose is no longer to make him suffer. Your purpose is to continue building a life so peaceful, disciplined, and fulfilling that you never again lose yourself trying to be loved correctly by the wrong person. Because the moment you genuinely become happy without someone, you stop fearing their absence completely. And that is the moment you truly take your power back.